Welcome to our video on building a disciple-making course. I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Training. What questions keep us up at night? When surveyed, pastors have regularly said, how do we reach people who don't know the Lord? How do we make disciples? And what changes do we need to make to help us reach and disciple people? So what is keeping us from making disciples that make disciples? Well, first I would say our training. We are taught and trained and tutored to build, serve, and lead the organization of the church. It's what we were taught and conditioned to do within our church culture. So, what is keeping us from making disciples that make disciples? Most of us have actually never been trained to make disciples that make disciples. Our training has been seminary degrees, church classes, training seminars, and conferences. And each time we go through these, we're really not being taught how to make disciples. We're being taught to grow our volunteer base, to form systems and processes, to create organizational structures, to preach sermons, and to assimilate new members into our church. And the result of our training, as we look around at Christendom, while it is crumbling and the landscape of the church is forever changed, we have a stark revelation that emerges. And that is, most of us have been trained and educated for a world that no longer exists. However, the call to make disciples, it still remains. It never wavers and it never changes. We're to make disciples that make disciples. I make that distinction. Some years ago, a friend of mine wrote a book on the basics for new Christians. And in making a disciple book that would help them become a disciple, we didn't go far enough at that time, this has been decades ago, in making certain that it was understood and said out loud that we're making disciples that are going to, in turn, go make other disciples, and that process is going to be repeated over and over again, and that's how you carry the gospel down through generations and through all nations. So the challenge to our thinking is that it can be difficult to wrap our mind around the following things. If you make disciples, you're always going to get the church, but if you make a church, you rarely will get disciples. The challenge to our thinking also is that most of us have become quite good at the church thing. We're good at being and doing church. And yet disciples are the only thing that Christ cares about. And it's the only number that Christ is counting. Not our attendance or our budgets or our buildings. He wants to know if we are making disciples. So here are some hard questions that we need to ask. Do the lives of our congregation look like the lives of those we see in Scripture? Are we practiced at getting people together once a week, or are we actually good at producing people that mirror those things we read about in the Scriptures? Have we substituted the biblical model of disciple for one that attends our services, gives our money, and serves sometimes when asked? Are we counting buildings, bucks, and bodies, or genuine disciples? The point is, instead of being focused, and often by our training, and I don't mean to bludgeon our seminary professors. I have both pastored them for years, lived near them, been a part of a family that has been a seminary and Christian college, Christian university teachers, and I have taught as an adjunct professor in Christian university and seminary. And so in saying this, that's not to punch at it. It's to help us take a hard look at where we are. If we've been counting and made priority the buildings and the dollars and the people, and we've got them together on Sunday morning, Sunday night, midweek service, Bible studies, main events, and we're just looking at gathering them together without any of them doing Matthew 16:24, if any man would come after me, let him do what? He is to deny himself and take up his cross. And so if we're not having and building and making disciples that make disciples, we're not headed toward the main thing that Christ is concerned about. And we've built an organization that historically in the U.S. has not been making disciples. But if our intent is to go make disciples, we will end up with a congregation, and a godly one. The truth is, effective discipleship builds the church, not the other way around. We need to understand the church is the effect of discipleship and not the cause. We think if we build buildings and an organization that then we can use those people to make disciples, instead of seeing that church flows out of disciple making. Look at Paul at Philippi. Look at that example. If you set out to build the church, there is no guarantee you will make disciples. It is far more likely that you will create customers who depend on the spiritual services that religious professionals provide. And we have a discipleship problem. We have a disciple-making problem. The truth is, if you're counting bodies, budgets, or buildings first and foremost, you're not counting the things that Jesus counted. And you're not counting the thing that will change the world. Disciples that make disciples. So, disciple making is both a relational invitation and a personal challenge. Let me state here that Jesus invited his followers into an intimate relationship with him. He gave them access to his daily life. Look back through the Gospels and look, from eating together to traveling and walking together to fishing together, in a boat together, healing the sick together, performing other miracles together, riding out a storm together, facing the threats of the Pharisees and Sadducees together. He gave them access to his daily life. It wasn't just concentrated classroom time sitting on the side of a hill or in a building somewhere, but it was his living out his life, living out his faith in front of them. There are two parts to this equation. One is a personal invitation, a relationship that you're inviting them to come into a personal relationship with you as the disciple maker. And second is a personal challenge that they do something. A gifted disciple maker invites people into a covenant relationship with him or her, but also challenges that person to change. So if you're catching the rub here, it is a personal relationship where they have full access to your life in everyday, daily life. Going to pick up the laundry from the cleaners, going to get the groceries, going to a ball game, sitting and reading a book, sitting and watching a program, eating together at the table or at the diner, cutting the yard, the grass, helping work with your children and disciplining your children, having your relationship of your marriage. They see all of it and learn out of that how to live a godly life, how to live out their faith in every arena of life. So there must be both parts working together for growth to occur. And I'm going to show you here in a moment 4 different church cultures, and one of them works well and the other 3 do not. So designing and developing the right disciple-making environment involves some things. So here are 4 environments that churches commonly have, not meaning every church has all 4, but you find these environments in churches and only one of them is working to make disciples that makes disciples. One is a comfortable culture. The comfortable culture is an invitation only. So we have created an attractional model church that is inviting people to come in. They sit and are witnessing, spectating our worship services, our Bible classes, our small groups, our events and activities. And they are invited to come in only. There is no challenge given. And what we end up with are consumers. If you want to have people that contribute to you instead of just being consumers, I read just last night that from surveys and research that was done, I believe by George Gallup, that only 10% of the average congregation in North America is involved in ministry. And we have a book sitting here on my bookshelves, the other 20%, and it is dealing with the fact that 20% of the people in our churches do 80% of the work, but the latest survey by Gallup polls says that only 10%. So the point is this: whether it's 10%, 20%, or 30%, it's an unhealthy situation that has created a group of people coming to our facilities, to our campuses, and are used to being waited on hand and foot, and who are consumers. It is all about them. It's not about taking up their cross, denying themselves, and following Christ. It's about coming in and taking up their cup of coffee, getting their Danish, sitting on a comfortable seat in a good place in the auditorium where they can clearly see and hear, and having a great program for their children where they are entertained and cared for. And while we may not be intending this to be the culture that we have developed, it's what I see regularly as my wife and I do ministry audits and first impression audits. We see this regularly as we visit churches, and we try and visit 30 churches a year to see how and what environment they have created and how they're doing ministry, both for us to learn as coaches, but also to see and write and record what we're seeing and where the country is going with our North American churches. You don't want to create a comfortable culture where people receive an invitation to attend, and it doesn't make them committed, sacrificial, self-denying believers, disciples. It's not the kind of disciples Christ is looking for. Then there is the boring culture. The boring culture has neither an invitation or a challenge. There's just nothing happening, and what you have there are apathetic believers. I mean, you ask them, and they just kind of shrug their shoulders. They're like a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old teenager in your house. So you say, well, you want to go to the game? You want to go see this or that or be involved in this or that? And they just kind of shrug their shoulders. They're apathetic. There's no drive, no passion. It's just bland. Then you have a stressful culture. This is where you got challenge only, and there's no support, and there's no safety, and all you're doing is pressing on them to perform. It's legalistic, it's performance driven, and it's challenge only. And what you end up there is discouraged believers. I was watching one time a documentary on a pro athlete who had spent his career in one particular sport with one franchise, with one team. Very unusual for athletes in the last 20 years, 30 years to do that. But he said that his parents, when he was little, he'd hit a home run and look over at them, and they were sitting a ways off down left field. They weren't sitting up by home plate. That the positioning of the parent tells you about the posture of the parent. He'd hit a home run, and he said, my parents just sat there with their arms crossed or their hands folded together and didn't cheer. And he said at the end of his career and during his adult life as a professional ball player, when he did really well, his parents came out of their seat and were cheering for them. In our environments for our church as a culture, don't you want to have one that really is an empowered culture where you support them? There's a place of safety, and we celebrate their advancement, and we pick them up when they fail, because I fail. As a disciple of Christ, I fail, fall, stumble, scrape, bruise. I get something broken about me, and I need someone to come alongside me and to empower me to get up again, to dust myself off, to heal my wounds, to fix the broken bone, and to encourage me to move ahead. And if you have this, what you've got is it creates disciples that make disciples. It creates producers instead of consumers. But it's all about making a disciple-making environment. It's a culture that is healthy. If you want some help with your culture, go grab a hold of Chan's book Samuel Chan's book on breaking your culture code, your church culture code. It's on our website, the Ministry Design Concepts website. We'll put it as a resource for this video so that you can read and see how to change and improve your church culture. And every church has a culture, whether they identify it or not, and what you can do as a leader to change it, because the leader is the most influential person in your church culture. You're in the driver's seat in most cases. Well, I want to give you a disciple-making model. It's not the model. It is a model. While it has been used here in the U.S., used by me and used by people in Europe and Africa and South America and Canada and so forth, that this is a model that has a track record that has been used. Now, remember that you want to be careful not to expect because a model was used by a sister church or by a friend of yours in another place, maybe in another country, that you can just march it right over, plug it into, and set it down on in your situation, in your context, and expect the same fine results. You might not. Let me reiterate this. We got to walk with the Lord and wait on Him so that He can tell us and give us His wisdom about what He is thinking for our particular ministry, how He wants us to make disciples. So as I've said before, we either come up with our model out of our memory, something we've used in the past. We mimic somebody else's model and borrow it and adapt it or adopt it to our situation, hopefully so it will fit and produce for us. Or we create our own masterpiece. We use our imagination and we walk with the Lord to wait on Him because He is the great creator and the one with the great imagination, and He can help us discern what is His will about how we develop a strategic model to make disciples. So here is a model. With all that said, here is a model for you to prayerfully consider. First, it has three parts. Information, where you give them, you educate, you give the people, the disciplee, information. And then you enroll them in an internship where they can see it put into action. And then immersion is where they stay in the culture long enough and under your internship, under your mentoring and care for them, under your discipling of them, that they in turn grow confident and capable to bring someone else under them, where they give them, after they won them to Christ, the information, offer them an internship, and those people are immersed in the disciple-making culture, and they in turn go and lead someone to Christ and make disciples with that. So that's what we're going to go through: information, internship, and immersion. So let's look first at information. This is teaching by passing on information, processes, and facts. We're going to teach them the Scriptures. We're going to help them understand the process of growing up in Christ. And we are going to give them the facts to back up what we're teaching them. This happens usually between a teacher and students. It is usually a classroom setting that we find in academia. And one is talking and the other people are listening. And so when you ask this, can you define for me what is teaching? And might I say, what is productive teaching? When have you taught as a teacher? Well, let me argue with you or put forth something for you to meditate on and mill around and kick around, talk to your leadership team and your mentor and others. Teaching is not just the dissemination of information. It's not just spewing it out. It often has been viewed that I have taught when I tell somebody something. And don't you just love it when you ask your wife a second time about something she told you to do, and she says to you, well, as I told you before. And here's the point. Just because you tell somebody the right information, the right processes, and supportive facts doesn't mean you've taught them yet. You've just been saying it. And so once we've told them, often we view that we've taught them. And so teaching is accomplished when? When is it accomplished? Well, I believe that it is accomplished when those we're teaching have learned and show and are tested that they've learned and that they've grabbed and grasped the precepts and concepts and the impact of what we're teaching, not just the facts. Rote memory leaves us with the ability to remember what, 15, 20, 30% of what we've heard? Now, let's move to internship. If I've won my argument with you here, let's move to internship. So we're going from giving them the right information. We're teaching them the scriptures. We're showing them the way. We're using all the tools that are available. And now we're going to do an internship. So we enroll them in training that occurs under an expert that has learned the trade, that has learned how to be a disciple. And now that person is looking to help us become a disciple. By the way, the word disciple at its root is to learn or to be a learner, is what I understand from my study. And so you've got a teacher and a learner. So one of you taught when they've learned. One of you trained, though. The apprentice learns the trade under the guidance of a teacher or trainer, an expert who is qualified now, who may also still be learning. Just as I'm a coach, but I still am learning every day, all the time, both by my research and study, but also by case studies where I'm coaching a church, a pastor, a leadership team, and we're learning things together that we go, oh, look how that worked in this case. Or look how we were found opposition to this. Satan was opposing us. Or look what worked in this kind of people's lives or this group of people's lives. So we're always learning. Coaching happens in this environment where they have an internship. And so it's a 4-step process. This is not original with me. I first learned it reading John Maxwell's writing on leadership. And so let me apply it to the internship. You have 4 steps in the process as you're coaching them. Hopefully this will help you develop your own model. First is that the apprentice is watching the expert perform the duty. All right, so they're doing it with them, and they're watching. The second step is the apprentice joins the expert while the expert is performing it. So they're right up against them, watching them do it. Thirdly is after the apprentice has watched the expert do it and joined them in the process of performance, the next step is that the expert steps back and watches the apprentice carry out the trade, the function, the form. And the last one is the expert steps completely out of the function and allows the apprentice to perform it by themselves with the expert observing. So that 4-step process can help you from mechanical tasks that are done in your church all the way through the spiritual discipling of someone else in their relationship and growth, their commitment to Christ. So hands-on experience is gained in a safe and supportive setting. Back to the 4 cultures. You need to have an empowering culture where the people feel safe and they're supported, that you're going to help them. You're going to cheer them on. You're going to give correction when necessary, but you're always going to work and be patient with them and help them, encourage them to continue on. You're going to empower your disciplee. So think trade school or a medical residency. In a trade school, it's not just lecturing in the classroom, but if they're, say, doing carpentry, they're going to take them into a cabinet shop and they're going to show them how to do it. Then they're going to take them to a real live cabinet shop, and they're going to have an internship where they are taught and they are schooled and corrected and perfected in their ability to make cabinets. And when they reach and finish the course, they graduate, and then they're immersed into their own business or under someone else's trade, and they continue in that immersion to become an expert themselves in carrying it out. Look at the medical field. Do we just teach in the classroom a guy who wants to become a surgeon and give him 100 hours of showing him how to do a heart transplant? Or do we set him beside a team of experts and he watches the expert do it from the booth, then he moves down to the operating table and he is right there assisting, And then eventually it goes where he does his first heart transplant after having done a number with the experts. And then eventually he is doing it by himself with the experts watching him or assisting him. So as you see this, I don't want a guy who's just read a book and now thinks he's an expert. I want someone who's been to trade school or has done a residency for a number of years and then learns. We apply this in all kinds of fields of discipline. In the design field, architects, at least I believe in South Carolina, but I think it's national, they have to do an internship for 2 or 3 years with a firm before they're allowed to go start their own. What we're trying to make certain is that they're adequately shown to be competent, capable, and have a capacity to carry out the work. So immersion is the third one, and this is seasoning. I'll give an illustration. My father started throwing baseball with me and got me my first glove when I was a little guy. I don't know, I was 7 or 8 years of age. I started with my boys when they were 3 with a wiffle bat and a ball. And I coached, all these years with my sons growing up. And I grew up with a dad who coached all the way up. And, I played baseball, and I'm just have been an average athlete. I'm not overly fast. I'm not overly skilled. So I'm just an average guy. But what happened was this. Seasoning from playing from the time I was a little guy up until now, I can take a baseball and throw it up in the air and watch the ball reach its height point. And then when it's coming down, I do not watch the ball into my hand. I just reach my hand out, and I know instinctively from almost 50 years of doing this, I'm seasoned at it, and I catch the ball. Seasoning in the disciple-making process builds people who are tried and tested and true and can perform, and they produce after their own faith. And so time in the field to gain experience through practice, and while coaching is still available, success is resting on the first 2 steps in the process to have that person well taught and well trained so that they can go out and carry out their trade. So immersion allows the disciple to learn by being in the culture for a season of time so they learn. So if you were going to have a guy, and this is what we did at our church plant, is we had other church planters who were planning to go out, come and help us plant the church, stay there, and they were taught and trained and immersed in it. And now we've sent them away from our church, supported them, and sent them out to their a place where God called them and burdened them for and called them to, and they have started a church, and they have done, as I'm going to teach you here in a moment, they have innovated their ministry there to fit their context and their personality and the way God has shaped them. So they are having a successful effort. And folks, let me tell you, that's an exciting thing to watch happen, and I'm privileged to be a part of that process. And so we want to immerse them in it so they know when things are happening, where things are happening, what disciple making is happening, why we're doing what we're doing, who is doing what, and how. Immersion helps them see the when, the where, the what, the why, the who, and the how. You've got to put them in it. You can't just teach them and set them out and think, okay, well, that we taught them, now go perform. You read a book, now go make it happen. I'll tell you what I think is a funny story. I had come to my house when I was first married. My wife and I had our first son, and we're living in this house, and it had way too many pine trees. And so showing up at our house was my father-in-law with a team of college professors who had read a book and had a manual in their hands, and they were going to cut down pine trees in our yard. And I am here to tell you that they hit 3 of the 4 sides of our house with a pine tree before they got done. They hit the fence and crushed it. They hit the gutters on our houses on 3 sides and dented those in. And they could have lost a limb or their own life doing that. Years later, I am out in my yard with a professional tree guy who I pastored, and we cut down 22 trees out of our yard. 22 trees, cut them up. He sold it as firewood. That was his fee to help his pastor get this done. And he said to me at one point, it is a good thing you can pastor, because you'd be dead if you had to be a tree surgeon. Because I still didn't know what we were doing. I had not been taught, trained in an internship, and immersed in it so that I was an expert tradesman having a track record working with trainers. So what is this going to require of us to inform, to intern, and then to immerse people in? Well, it's going to require accessibility, allowing people that invitation for them to come into our life and giving them accessibility to our lives 24/7, so to speak. So it doesn't have to think, well, now it's an hour. I'm going to give this guy an hour of my time, and you sit and you teach the scriptures to him and send him out. No, that's just information. You've got to give them accessibility, provide accountability, so if they fail, you help them. And you've got to balance each part of this so that in your accessibility, you're giving them information, you are giving them a chance for internship, and you're immersing them in what a Christ-like believer looks like, acts like, thinks like, looks like, speaks like, everything. You model Christ incarnate in and through your life so they can see it, and they ought to see foremost your relationship with your Savior. But you have to give them accessibility and accountability for a season of time for these 3 steps to work its started to say magic, but you probably understand what I'm saying, to work its work in us, to produce it in us. And we have to balance each part of the process. You can't get out of balance for your context, the way that you do it, for it to work. For instance, in our balance here with the people that I have ministered to, they are heavily overbalanced in the information process and not the internship and the immersion process. And so we have to really work on the accountability and accessibility to see them learn how to live out in their personal relationship with Christ, how to commit themselves to Him and conduct themselves both in character, quality, and in their creed, their thinking, and in their conduct. So let's say it another way. Academics, information, apprenticeship, internship, and application, that's the seasoning or the immersion. That you want to follow these 3 steps. And here's the wonderful thing. We'll talk about this in the next webinar. But that is, it allows you to customize your model to your context, to you and to the people that you're discipling. It allows you to come up with God's design for your ministry and how He wants you to carry out making disciples that make disciples, because it's not going to look the same everywhere. So let's examine your ministry design. Okay, just stick with me here and let's talk about this for a moment. What is your ministry designed to do most? Probably worship services and Sunday school or small groups, Bible studies during the week, prayer meetings, retreats, conferences, and seminars. You may teach by DVDs or books or webinars like we're doing here, or podcast or blog post. You may do any of these things. And what are those things? Information, information, information. It's a gathering, and you are instructing them. So you're instructing. You're feeding information. You're saturating them with academics. So examine your ministry a little further. What's missing? Well, probably what's missing is the apprenticing. Ample disciple makers in your church that can help you provide for an apprentice an internship for them to go. So you may have to start as one guy who goes and gets one person, and you offer to them not only instruction, information, but internship, and then immersion into that by giving them access and accountability to your life for a period of time. And you have to build a measuring tool, a matrix, to try and judge as you walk with the Lord and they're walking with the Lord, where are they? So you have to create a design that allows you to measure and adapt and adjust what you see succeeding and working in their life. And this is an art, not just a science. And it requires us, not at any time can we just go on autopilot and leave God out of it. He's the one that's doing the saving and the sanctifying. You're just a servant who is leading and providing what you've learned and investing that into their life. But we need more disciple makers, and we're probably missing apprenticeship, internship. So what model do we use most? We teach, hoping the students will learn and apply without any support or accountability. The accessibility we're offering them is the classroom, not the everyday life. And would you trust a surgeon to operate on you who has only had classroom experience and no residency? Are you nuts? What if your surgeon could teach you how to do a kidney transplant, and it took him 3 weeks to teach you, 40, 50 hours a week, and your wife needs a kidney transplant? Are you going to go do it yourself, or are you going to go back to that surgeon who's been training all of his life, at least a group of years, and has gone through the instruction needed, the internship that is needed, and immersed himself in it? He's got this many under his belt, and he has created a team of tried and true and tested team to do the surgery on you. Well, none of us are going to let a surgeon operate who's only got classroom experience. But this is how we've designed our discipleship processes. We just teach them in their heads. So listening to a 30-minute lecture on how to ride a bike doesn't get the job done. Some hands-on will be needed. When I taught our sons how to ride a bike, you remember teaching your kids how to ride a bike, or now you're teaching your grandchildren, that's where we are, how to ride a bike? I'd have my hand on the back of their seat and my other hand on their steering wheel, on their handlebars, and I'm taking them on level ground in a cleared place where they're not going to hit a tree or a car hit them, or they hit a car or a boulder or a building, and they fall off, and you pick them back up, and they're crying, and you hug them, and you kiss the boo-boo, and and you get them back up, unless they broke their arm and the bone sticking out of their flesh. But you put them back up and encourage them and maybe discipline them. Get back on the bike. Let's try it again. And you run. What you do? You run alongside them and catch them if they're going to fall, or pick them up if they do. Until what? Until they can ride, and then they're going to help you teach the younger sister or brother how to ride a bike. Now, we keep thinking we can fill their heads with information, and it will ooze its way into their hearts, their commitment, and leak out through their hands. So it goes from their heads to their hearts to their hands, and it ain't working because we're not doing the apprenticeship and the application. So our cultural way of thinking is this. It's a Western assumption that knowing something is the same as knowing about something. You can know who Christ is and never have a personal relationship with him. To know him, you must trust and accept his way, his person, and his salvation, and build a relationship where you experience him. I've said for years, when I die and meet Christ, I want to look him in the eyes, and I don't want him to be a stranger. I want to, so to speak, learn to know Christ well enough in my relationship with him to know what it is to figuratively look him in the eyes, that I know him in his character, in his thinking, in his posture, and in his person. It's a relationship. I mean, did you want to just learn about your wife, or do you want to experience her in all ways, in all the ways, intimately, relationally, with groups of other people, in rearing children, in rearing grandchildren, in reaching people with the gospel, that you want to have a full experience with her? Well, so do we want to have a full experience with disciples who are going to experience fully Christ. So just knowing the facts, the academics, doesn't mean that they're going to go into an apprenticeship and learn to apply what they're learning in their personal relationship with Christ. It's more than head knowledge. It goes to their heart, where they commit themselves to Christ in a personal relationship with him and live it out their hands in life. So we teach people about prayer and Bible reading, missions, but fail to show them how. So we've got to model it for them. So internship is needed. We have to expand our concept of learning. A disciple is a learner. We've got to expand our concept of this from the classroom to the practice field and to the playing field. From the classroom to the practice field to the playing field. And so if we're going to help them perfect their performance as being a Christ-like person who in their creed, character, and conduct are going to commit and are going to concentrate themselves to Christ, and they are going to live out, continue living out in their relationship with Christ, so that they in turn invite others and challenge them to take up their cross, die to self, and follow Christ. We're trying to reproduce in disciples who make disciples those who will help make people who are willing to become fully devoted and developed followers of Christ, lifetime learners in their relationship with him. Well, I'm Marshall Shannon, Ministry Design Coach at Ministry Design Training and Concepts. You can reach me at this email address or either one of these phone numbers, and it's our prayer that God would richly bless your efforts to plow through this, to go on your journey, to see what way God would have you to make disciples.